So we left off here looking at this now in first normal form relation. One thing I want to point out, I don't think I did in the previous video, is the key for this might not be apparent because obviously we used to be using, before we created the repetitive tuples to manage the course information, we used to have one of each student ID, right? But now we have more than one. So there's 3 Brians, and there is only 1 John, but there's 2 Sallys, and forget about Jack. He was a lost cause. But what I want to point out is that now we have to actually have a composite key of both the student ID and the course title. For this example, those 2 things do in fact provide uniqueness for these rows. But now we want to move past this, and we want to kind of migrate this into second normal form. To do that, I'm going to add just a little bit of information to it. All right, so this particular example we're going to leave behind, and we're going to start with a little bit more complex one. I need just some more information. I didn't want to muddy the waters before with too much, but to show all the differences we need to take care of for second normal form, we really need to have some more pieces of the puzzle here. So here you can see that I have additional columns. I kept marital status and student name. We now have a course number in addition to course title. As you can see, those 2 things look like they have a dependency. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. We have also a grade level. Now this isn't like sophomore, freshman, etc., junior, senior. It's actually just graduate or undergraduate. I'm keeping things simple. And we have a grade that the student got apparently when they took the course, right? So as it's laid out, I have my 3 rows here for my 3 courses and my 3 grades that go along with it. Again, there's some more duplicated data here because my level seems duplicated, but actually, that's per course, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. But the duplicated data still remains for marital status and name and stuff like that. All right. Now, the first thing we need to kind of grasp for second normal form is that the key here is that each table must have data related to only one thing, right? The idea is that all of the attributes relate to the actual key of the table. And if you look at the functional dependencies here, if you think through on them, we can look at student ID and student name, and you can say, okay, so does the student ID and the student name have a dependency on each other? And the answer is yes. If I am, obviously I don't have a last name here, but I can't have a student ID 1 who's Brian and a student ID 1 who's, Mary. That doesn't work, right? Only one person can have the student ID of 1. So this is good. These 2 things can go together. The same thing with marital status, right? I can't be both married and divorced at the same time while occupying the same student ID. So this also has a functional dependency on the student ID. We can inherently now group kind of these pieces together. We know that these are dependent on one another. But let's look at the course number and the course title. But let's start with course number first. Does course number have a functional dependency on the student ID? And the answer here is no, because there's nothing about the course that says Brian has to be the one taking it. In fact, down here, both Brian and Sally take 221, software development 2. So there is no functional dependency on this. And this was, we knew this because this is the reason why we ended up with more rows, right? So that's always something to look for. When we were back here and we ended up in a situation where before this one, we had 1 row per person, right? And then as soon as we did this, we had 3 rows. That's a red flag. That is when you know you're breaking second normal form. So this course number here is going to be a separate relation. Now let's see what might go with it. So what is functionally dependent on course number? Is course title functionally dependent on course number? The answer here is yes. The way we have this laid out, it absolutely is. true that only one course is going to have the number 542, and that course will only ever have one name. But is level dependent on the course title? The answer here is also yes, the way we have this laid out. This 542 is intended to be a graduate level course, where OrganArc's down here, where Software Development 2 here, 221, is intended to be an undergraduate course, as is OrganArc. So we can group these three things together. What may not, we're going to put right up here. Let's put course up here, just so we kind of see how we're going to break this out, and student up here. And remember, the goal here is to group things together with their own entities, right? To break this whole thing apart into separate entities. Now, what might not be obvious in the beginning is that this grade is actually separate from either one of these, right? The grade is not functionally dependent on a student. Unless we're talking about my GPA here, but we're really not. We're talking about my grade in the course. Remember, see, I have an A, B, and C in these three different courses. My grade in a course is not functionally dependent on my existence as a person. My grade in the course is also not functionally dependent on the course itself, right? Everybody, I mean, I know you guys would love this, but everybody who takes 542 does not inherently get an A, although I'm sure that would be, our favorite way to be right now being in this course, but it's just not true, right? The grade is actually dependent on two things. It's dependent on the combination of the course number and the student. So this I'm going to call enrollment. It's actually functionally dependent on a third entity, that is the enrollment of the student in the course. All right, so now that we've seen how we break this apart, let's actually see that. So here are three different relations that I've created to fix our problem and put it in second normal form. So you can see here the student one is pretty straightforward. I grabbed those three relations from before, and now they have their very own table. Notice that there is no more need for repeated data. So if I change my marital status, which I'm not going to do because I will be in big trouble, I don't have to worry about there being update, delete, and any kind of other anomaly, right? It's all good. Same thing here with course. Before, two students were taking SD2, so there was opportunities there as well for update, delete, and just general repetition anomalies. And here I have only one row for SD2. So again, courses as well as students is now explicitly describing one and only one entity. Now, the fun part here is actually enrollment. So enrollment, remember, we identified that grade was specific to the student taking the course. As we noted before, Brian was enrolled in 3 courses, so he would have a grade for each and every course that he took, as does Sally with 2, right? So what enrollment does is combine the keys from both the student and the course, and then you can, in addition, have attributes that are tied to that are specific to this entity. So this enrollment entity consists of the keys of the other entities and any specific data that is specific to that enrollment. Now, one thing I didn't do here is break courses out into, say, like a course and an actual section. You've probably heard the term section before because that's what you actually enroll in. You're probably aware that more than one instance of a course can go on at any given time. So for example, there might be 5 software development 1 courses running this semester. So each one of those things would be an instance of the course. Ours doesn't go that deep. I'm pretending that there's only one course given at a time to avoid the extra complexity here. It's not required to prove how second normal form works. It would be yet another good example of it, but it's not required here to make that happen. So just so you know, like, why that's left out, that is the case there. Let's just follow up by looking at the keys here, just so we can kind of relate these keys over. The student one is pretty obvious, right? We talked about that in a previous video. we said that there could be more than one person named Brian, John, or Sally, so it made sense to have a unique ID so that we knew that a second person named John per se would have a unique record from the first one named John. Courses is something very similar. Now, I opted to have this course number added in. We could have honestly just went with course title so long as none of them duplicated, but being that we're familiar with the course number and it gave us a good place to start for an ID, or for a key, I should say, then I thought that was a good addition. So in this case, this implies that no course will have the same number. So in other words, I could not have a history course with the number 542. Now we know in reality that's not the case, right? There's Math 101 and there's English 101, and they both have a course number 101. Now, in that reality, in the more common reality of how schools actually work, the key is a composite, right? The key is a composite of the department that they're in and that course number. But here, for simplicity, we're leaving out the department and we're just sticking with the course number. So this works as our key. It just implies that we only have one course with a number. The course title is functionally dependent, of course, on that course number, as is the level, as we discussed before. So this now can tie together these two things by using the student ID and the course number. So you can see here that student ID ties back to me. So 1, which is Brian, is tied into 542, which is Database Management Systems, 221, which is SD2, and 422, which is Oregon Arc. John over here is tied into SD1, and Sally, who's number 3, is tied into both Software Development 2 and this graduate history course.